Hey everybody, Marcus here. This is going to be the last video in my series on feminist epistemology. In the first video, we covered the core concept underlining all of feminist epistemology, namely, the situated knower. In the second video, we covered standpoint theory, in which we explored the concept of epistemic privilege and saw the framework for the progressive stack being developed. In the third video, we covered feminist postmodernism and discovered how the progressive stack has evolved into the progressive web, and in turn, the formation of intersectional feminism. In that video, we also took intersectional feminism to its logical conclusion, which is ultimately solipsism, and therefore the collapse of feminism itself. Now, in this video, we will cover the third and final epistemic model in feminist epistemology. This model is feminist empiricism. First, let us discuss the relationship of feminist empiricism to empiricism, well, in general. Empiricism is the view that experience provides the sole or primary justification for knowledge. From the classical empiricists to some early 20th century theorists, empiricists held that the content of experience could be described in fixed, basic, theory-neutral terms. For example, in terms of sense data. Most also suppose that philosophy could provide a transcendent or external justification for empirical or scientific methods. Quine, a mid-20th century philosopher, revolutionized empiricism by rejecting both of these ideas. For Quine, observation is theory-laden. Theory is cast in terms of complex concepts not immediately given in experience, which are potentially subject to revision in light of further experience. And epistemology, far from providing an extra-scientific vindication of science, is just another project within science in which we empirically investigate our own practices of inquiry. In these respects, feminist empiricists are successors of Quine. However, Quine accepted a sharp division between facts and values that feminist empiricists argue cannot be sustained within a thoroughly naturalized empiricism. Feminist empiricists consider how feminist values can legitimately inform empirical inquiry, and how scientific methods can be improved in light of feminist demonstrations of sex bias in currently accepted methods. Feminism's version of naturalized epistemology, therefore, does not follow Quine in reducing epistemology to non-normative psychological investigations, but rather holds the roles of value judgments in rigorous empirical inquiry. Quine also presupposes an individualistic account of inquiry. His preferred reduction basis for naturalized epistemology is behavior and neuropsychology. Feminist empiricists are concerned with the impact on inquiry of social practices relating to gender, race, class, and other bases of inequality. They therefore take sociology, history, and science studies seriously. Most advocate a socialized epistemology in which inquiry is treated as a fundamental social process, and the subjects of knowledge may even be communities or networks of individuals. Now, this brings to light two paradoxes: the paradox of bias and the paradox of social construction. Firstly, much of feminist criticisms of science consist in exposing the androcentric and sexist biases in scientific research, especially in theories about women, sexuality, and gender differences. The force of this criticism seems to rest on a prior empiricist commitment to the view that bias is epistemically bad. Yet, advocates of feminist science urge that feminist values inform scientific inquiry. Now, this amounts to a recommendation that science would improve if it adopted certain biases. This is the paradox of bias. Secondly, and relatedly, much feminist criticism of science are devoted to exposing the influence of social and political factors on scientific inquiry. Scientists advocate androcentric and sexist theories because they are influenced by the sexist values of the wider society. Now, this would seem to imply that, to eliminate these social biases, feminists adopt an individualistic epistemology. Instead, though, feminist epistemologists urge not that inquirers insulate themselves from social influences, but that they restructure scientific practices to be open to different social influences. This is the paradox of social construction. Feminist empiricists argue that the key to dissolving both paradoxes is to undermine the assumptions that underlie them, that biases, political values, and social factors can influence inquiry only by displacing the influence of evidence, logic, and whatever other cognitive factors tend to lead to true theories. Feminists say that not all bias is epistemically bad. There are three general strategies that feminists use to try and dissolve these two paradoxes. Now, these three ways are as follows. 1. Pragmatics. 2. Procedure. And 3. Moral realism. Now, let us discuss each in sequence. The pragmatic approach stresses the plurality of aims that inquiry serves. Inquiry seeks truths, or at least empirically adequate representations, but which truths any particular inquiry seeks depends on the uses to which those representations will be put, many of which are practical and derived from social interests. The paradoxes are dissolved by showing how responsible inquiry respects a division of labor between the functions of evidence and social values, the evidence helping inquirers track the truth, and the social values helping inquirers construct representations out of those truths that serve the pragmatic aims of inquiry. Now, this view may be joined with a view of nature as rich, complex, and messy. No single theory captures the whole structure of reality, since different ways of classifying phenomena will reveal different patterns useful to different practical interests. The procedural approach argues that epistemically bad biases can be kept in check through an appropriate social organization of inquiry. A social organization that holds people with different biases accountable to one another will be able to weed out bad biases, even if no individual on their own can be free of bias. This view may be joined with the idea that the subject of knowledge, epistemic rationality, or objectivity is the epistemic community, not the individual. Finally, the moral realist approach argues that moral, social, and political value judgments have truth values, and that feminist values are true. Inquiry informed by feminist values, therefore, does not displace attention to the evidence because the evidence vindicates these values. Feminist empiricists appeal to the pragmatist tradition to undermine the sharp dichotomy between fact and value. They argue that Quine's arguments about the underdetermination of theory by evidence leads to a view of facts as partially constituted by values, and values by facts. Without a sharp distinction between facts and values, it cannot be argued that inquiry explicitly motivated by feminist values is in principle opposed to the truth. Whether any particular feminist theory is true will depend on empirical investigation informed by epistemic norms. Norms which may themselves be reformed in light of the merit of the theories they generate. Now, this is the project of naturalized epistemology, whereby the vindication of norms of inquiry is sought not outside, but within empirical investigation. Okay, let us spend a few moments reflecting on what has been said so far. Now, firstly, in feminist empiricism, we see the same pattern unfold as we saw in standpoint theory and in feminist postmodernism. In standpoint theory, feminists took Marxism as their basis and then adopted it to their own needs. In feminist postmodernism, feminists took the works from French philosophers like Lacan, Foucault, and Derrida and again adopted it to their own agenda. And now we see that in feminist empiricism, feminists have taken the works of Quine and are adopting those works to their own agenda. So if someone were so inclined as to dive deeply into feminist empiricism, he would be best suited to start by reading Quine. Now, if we were to sum up Quine as it relates to feminist epistemology, we can say that Quine argues that observation is theory-laden. Now, let us try and clarify this statement. Imagine that you are taking measurements of a squirrel. You weigh the squirrel, which gives you its weight. You submerge the squirrel's body in water to measure the displacement and so get the volume of the squirrel. And finally, You stretch it out and measure it from head to tail. What you have are seemingly three objective measurements: weight, volume, and length. Now, what Quine is saying is that these three objective measurements are value-laden. Now, how can this possibly be true? Well, because something outside of the measurements themselves compelled you to measure weight, volume, and length, as opposed to, say, counting the individual hairs on the squirrel, or determining the temperature at which the squirrel's tail freezes, or countless other things you could have measured about the squirrel. Quine is saying that our values inform what we will measure, but not only what we will measure, but that the measures themselves are value-laden theories. For example, when we say the squirrel is, say, 2 kilograms in weight, what exactly makes the measure of kilogram empirically objective? A kilogram is itself a theory, a standard that was asserted but not itself derived from any observation. In the same way, a centimeter is an arbitrary value, as a centimeter could be reclassified by, say, appending 1 millimeter. Now, this new 1.1 centimeter value can now be redefined as 1 centimeter. All you need to do is, on a ruler, draw the lines slightly further apart. Now, if weight, volume, and length are all arbitrarily chosen theories with arbitrarily asserted values, and objectivity is based on theories like weight, volume, and length, then objectivity is itself an arbitrary theory. Now, Quine accounts for this arbitrariness by reducing our choices to psychology. There's something, apparently, in the theories of weight, volume, and length that psychologically appeal to us, and this is why we have come up with these measures. Now, so far, these are all Quine's ideas, at least, as far as I understand Quine's work. As, I am not very well read in Quine, I can be wrong, so if you are more familiar and I'm saying something incorrect, please feel free to correct me. But if this is all Quine, then what do the feminists add to the story? Well, the feminists then assert that things like weight, volume, and length are androcentric, meaning that these are male theories that came out of the male mind due to a psychological preference of the male mind for such theories. So in this way, weight, volume, and length become sexist. As objectivity is based on the theories like weight, volume, and length, so too objectivity is sexist. As women in the sciences are forced to use theories such as weight, volume, and length, they are at a natural disadvantage and therefore oppressed by science, or something to that effect. Now, it is a little hyperbolic to state that weight, volume, or length are deemed sexist from the feminist perspective, but I wanted to use a very radical extreme to get the point across of how feminist empiricists gender theories. Now, there's still a lot of ground that can be covered in feminist empiricism. Feminist empiricism discusses how bias can be a source of error and how other biases, which they deem as correct, can be constructively harnessed. They also challenge value neutrality in science as well as objectivity. I could go into further depth in this video, but will elect not to, as what has been said already covers the core of what feminist empiricism is about. If you have an interest in pursuing this subject in depth, then feel free to do so. What I will do is close this video by showing in what ways feminist empiricism attacks objectivity. I will not pursue each point in any detail, but merely give you a guide. In the process, we will uncover how Newton's Principia becomes a rate manual. Feminists regard the following conceptions of objectivity as problematic. A. Subject-object dichotomy. What is really real exists independent of knowers. B. Aperspectivity. Objective knowledge is ascertained through the view from nowhere, a view that transcends or abstracts from our particular locations. C. Detachment. Knowers have an objective stance towards what is known when they are emotionally detached from it. D. Value neutrality. Knowers have an objective stance towards what is known when they adopt an evaluatively neutral attitude towards it. E. Control. Objective knowledge of an object is attained by controlling it, especially by experimental manipulation and observing the regularities it manifests under control. F. External guidance. Objective knowledge consists of representations whose content is dictated by the way things really are, not by the knower. These ideas are often combined into a package of claims about science that its aim is to know the way things are independent of knowers, and that scientists achieve this aim through detachment and control, which enables them to achieve aperspectivity and external guidance. This package arose in the 17th and 18th centuries as a philosophical account of why Newtonian science was superior to its scholastic predecessor. You see, the mathematization that took place based on the method of Bacon and Newton in a way cemented the so-called androcentric bias into science, Newton's Principia being the foundational work at the time. Now, one of the shifts in thought from antiquity to modernity was man's relationship to nature. In antiquity, man had to respect nature and was perpetually at the mercy of nature. In modernity, man asserted that he could dominate nature and take from nature what he wants. Now, there's a quote from Bacon that I believe reflects this sentiment very well. Now, it goes as follows. While humility gains us entrance to the study of nature, cruelty is the means by which we reach our end. Mere experience will take us only into nature's outer courts. To come to nature's inner chambers, we must tear it to pieces, constraining, vexing, dissecting, and torturing nature in order to force it to reveal the secret entrances to its treasure chambers. You see, when you hear that Newton's Principia is a rape manual, it does not mean instructions on how a man can rape a woman, but instructions on how man can rape nature, how man is to take from nature what he feels entitled to, namely, how to do modern science. Now, understood in this way, and becoming aware of the historical shift between antiquity to modernity, the idea that Newton's Principia is a rape manual, it kind of in a way makes sense. But anyways, I hope that you enjoyed this video. And I hope that this series has been useful in understanding the epistemological dimension of feminism. Now, very soon, I'll be starting a new series. Over the course of several videos, I'll be discussing modernity, starting from the theological grounding rooted in scholasticism, leading straight into the Enlightenment, and finally, to where we are now. By the end of that series, I will offer a solution to all the nonsense we are experiencing today. In a way, I will answer the woman question, as it were. However, in order to understand that solution and appreciate why it will work, you'll need to watch that entire series, which is going to be pretty long. But for now, thanks for listening. Go team.